Great. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So, so the first thing I want to say is, number one, I think in the members area there is an hour-long presentation on imposter syndrome. So if this is something you struggle with, that video is there. It's kind of a more fleshed out version of what I'm going to run through today. The first thing I want to lay out is that there's a distinction between the inner critic and imposter syndrome. So inner critic is usually a symptom of imposter syndrome, and it kind of kicks up in language, that voice that runs in your head of, I don't know what I'm doing, you're a fraud, all of that. The imposter syndrome is actually more felt in the body, and it's really closely related to anxiety. So you can be functioning and doing all the things and have a voice running in your head that says, you're making mistakes, you're not going to do this right, you're in big trouble here. That's a little different than that felt sense of imposter syndrome that kind of prevents you from actually making some steps forward. And it comes from kind of a fear of basically not being perfect. So you really feel it in the body as those anxiety syndromes. And it often comes down to two main things. I'm a fraud and everyone's going to figure it out. Or my past successes were a fluke and I can't replicate what I did before. And both of those things show up, the fraud thing of like, if I walk into a room and it's full of more experienced estate planning attorneys, somehow they're going to be able to see or hear from something that I do or say that I don't actually know what I'm doing. Or even though I graduated from college and then got into law school and graduated from law school and then passed the bar and am now a licensed practicing attorney, all of those previous successes, well, that was somehow like magically came through. Somebody else did that. But this one thing, that's the thing I'm not going to be able to do. And it can be really, especially prominent in underrepresented populations. So I want to be clear on that. Like when we walk into a room, we don't all walk into the same room. There are different experiences when there are different people in the room. So I just want to bring that forward so that we acknowledge that we're not all kind of experiencing the same reality when it comes to launching our business. So it's really hard for us to feel that way. It comes down to, I talk more about it in the video, but basically our brains are wired to want to be included. And when we don't feel included, that's really, really hard on us. So if you go in thinking, I'm a fraud, everybody's going to figure out that all my past successes were flukes. It creates this uncomfortable sensation inside us. And what happens as the result of that discomfort, and again, this is happening more on the physical level than it is on the mental level, is that we stay stuck in a painful place rather than break ground and do something unfamiliar. And this is why, when you look around at people and you say, well, I don't understand why they stay in that situation. Well, it's actually easier for us as human beings to stay in the uncomfortable situation rather than risk feeling like an imposter or a fraud and like everybody's going to figure out that all of our previous accomplishments were flukes and that we're a fraud, basically. So when you step into a new environment like you all have, you've all just, signed up for 2HLL and maybe you've done some estate plans, but you're trying to make the business more lucrative or productive for you. Maybe you're brand new to estate planning. That sense of, oh my gosh, I'm not, like, I don't fit in here. I don't fit in here. Everybody knows more than I do. Everybody was more successful than I was. That sense really kicks up when you step into a new environment. And if you've come from the background of working in big law or at another law firm and you're opening your own firm, then it's even more prevalent because you're not just learning estate planning, you're also learning how to run a law firm and how to have a successful law practice. And about 80% of Americans say that they have imposter syndrome. So you're not alone. I've met with over 100 2HLLs. You are definitely in the majority if you acknowledge having imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome. Like it just kicks up on a regular basis. So I can offer some strategies, particular, obviously to kind of doing your first estate plan or your first trust if that's where you are. But this really helps in lots of different environments. And so the first thing I really recommend is trying to counter your brain's negativity bias, right? Like the brain, it's what kept us alive 200,000 years ago on the savannah. If you stepped into a certain kind of bush and somebody got bitten by a snake, Your brain is wired to look at the bushes and say, maybe I shouldn't go there. So it means that we forget the positive and we really hyper focus on the negative. And there's nothing wrong with you if that's what you're doing. That's what your brain is wired to do. It's how we stayed alive, basically. So the counter for that is to measure the gain, not the gap, right? So measure what you've learned rather than what you don't know. And I call this, when I'm working with coaching clients, like a never-ending list of accomplishments. So even if you get out your legal pad, and I recommend a brand new one, and just start at the very top line and say, the gain for me today was that I went to the Q&A session. The gain was that I asked my question. The gain was that I read a bunch of stuff on the Facebook group and learned something from it. The gain was I reviewed the modules. I downloaded the slides. Get really, really, really granular with your gains in the beginning, because if your idea of gain is, okay, well, I've been in the course for 5 weeks and I don't feel like I'm ready to do my first will or trust, so I must be failing. That's a huge hurdle to overcome. And it's going to really reinforce that sense of being an imposter, especially if your brain kind of goes nuts and then says, oh, well, everybody else in the class, they sound super confident. I'm sure they're ready to do their first will or their first trust. They're out there. They've probably already got clients. Focus on yourself and focus on your gains. What did you do today to move you forward? Similar to a gratitude journal, you don't have to be grateful for attending the Q&A. If you can throw that in there, that's like a nice little bonus. But really, if you showed up and you paid attention, that is gain that's worth measuring. I mean, frankly, in almost every area of your life. And then use the support communities. Laura mentioned right when I joined the call of getting a mentor or co-counsel for the things that you don't know how to do. Ask questions in the Facebook group. People are really supportive. We've got a lot of experienced attorneys who answer questions there. They will help you out. You can find people in your state or in your region who are willing to help. And I think it's easy for people to feel like, well, that makes me a burden. That's part of the imposter, right? Like if I tell them that I need help, then they know I'm a fraud. But the other way to look at it is kind of, how would you feel if somebody came to you and said, I'm a little uncertain on this particular element. Would you be willing to take a look at it for me? Right? Most people, not everybody, I'll admit that, but most people are like, yeah, people love to help. You're not a burden. They want to see people succeed. They're glad to reach back and give somebody a hand up and say, yeah, you can belong here too, and I'll make sure that you do. So use resources, use your mentors, use local networking groups, like find people that you can partner up with. It helps counteract that feeling of being alone. And then finally, this is my last one, so Laura can wrap up, but use a cognitive reframe. This is really common in acceptance and commitment therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. So if what's going on in your brain is, boy, wait until they find out that I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I don't know anything about this. Wait till they find out that I've only been practicing estate planning for like a hot second. Make that into something like, everyone who starts something new feels off base in the beginning, but I know I've done hard things in the past and I can do this. I have the grit to do the research and learn this and figure it out. So when those thoughts surface in your brain, it takes a little time, but write them down and find a way to reframe it that gives you a positive extension into the future and gives you the confidence that you really, truly do deserve. Like it is no small thing to have graduated from college and graduated from law school and passed the bar. Like you can learn this. I have no doubt whatsoever that you can learn how to do this. It's just going to take a little time and a little bit of willingness to feel uncomfortable while you figure it out.